Before the Ninja became one of the most recognizable names in motorcycling, there was another Kawasaki that was already pushing the limits of what a Japanese motorcycle could be. It was big. It was fast. It was unapologetically mechanical. And today, many younger riders barely remember its name. The Kawasaki GPZ1100. But here's the interesting question. What if Kawasaki brought that name back in 2027? Not as another modern superbike, but as a massive, old-school Japanese muscle machine redesigned for a new generation. And if Kawasaki actually did it, this could be one of the most interesting retro revivals we've seen. Long before the modern Ninja family became Kawasaki's performance identity, the company was already experimenting with powerful four-cylinder motorcycles. The GPZ1100 represented an important moment in that evolution. It wasn't trying to be a tiny, lightweight race replica. Instead, it combined something that Japanese manufacturers understood extremely well: big displacement, serious performance, and everyday usability. That combination made motorcycles like the GPZ1100 incredibly interesting, because this wasn't simply about chasing a top speed number. It was about having a motorcycle that felt powerful everywhere. Roll the throttle, and you had torque. Open it up, and the four-cylinder engine reminded you why large displacement Japanese motorcycles became legends. This was the era when muscle mattered, and Kawasaki was right in the middle of it.
But motorcycle technology was changing rapidly. Aerodynamics became more important. Chassis development accelerated. Racing technology began influencing production motorcycles. And Kawasaki eventually introduced a machine that would completely reshape its image: the Ninja. Suddenly, the future of Kawasaki performance looked different. More aerodynamic, more aggressive, more focused. The GPZ name gradually became overshadowed by the Ninja identity. And that's what makes the GPZ1100 so fascinating today. It sits in that transition period between the old-school Japanese muscle bike and the modern superbike. It was essentially part of the bridge between two eras. And that's exactly why a modern revival could work. Now imagine Kawasaki decided to resurrect the GPZ1100. Not literally copying the old motorcycle. That wouldn't make sense. Instead, take the philosophy. Give it a modern chassis, modern brakes, modern electronics, and a powerful four-cylinder engine. But keep the character. That's the important part. The front end could borrow subtle visual cues from the original GPZ while using modern LED lighting underneath. The bodywork could remain relatively compact, not completely naked, but not covered in aggressive superbike fairings either. Something in between. A proper Japanese muscle machine. And that could be the key. Because today, many motorcycles are incredibly capable, but increasingly similar. A modern GPZ1100 could stand apart simply by having personality. And then we get to the most important question. What engine would power it? The obvious fantasy would be a modern 1100cc class inline-four. Imagine a naturally aspirated engine with strong mid-range torque, a high-revving top end, and an exhaust note that reminds you why four-cylinder Japanese motorcycles became so addictive. But Kawasaki wouldn't need to chase insane horsepower. That's not the point. The GPZ1100 should be about usable performance. Something around the 130–150 horsepower range would already make this motorcycle seriously fast. And if Kawasaki focused on torque, the bike could become a real-world weapon. Fast on the highway, fast through corners, comfortable enough for long-distance riding, and still completely mechanical in character. And this is where the GPZ1100 fits perfectly into the Japanese muscle bike story. Think about the motorcycles that became cult favorites: the Suzuki GSX-1400, Yamaha XJR-1300, Kawasaki Zephyr-1100, Honda CB-1300. These bikes aren't remembered simply because they were fast. They're remembered because they had presence. Large engines, large bodies, simple silhouettes, and an unmistakable feeling of mechanical strength. The GPZ1100 could occupy that same territory, but with a more performance-oriented personality. Imagine parking a modern GPZ1100 next to an XJR 1300 or GSX 1400. You'd immediately see the difference. The XJR says, muscle. The GSX says, torque. The Zephyr says, heritage. And the GPZ, performance before the Ninja.
The biggest reason I think this concept is interesting isn't nostalgia alone. It's the fact that modern riders are increasingly interested in motorcycles with identity. Retro bikes don't have to reproduce the past. They can reinterpret it. That's why names like Z900 RS have been so effective for Kawasaki. The formula is simple. Take something people remember, remove the outdated technology, and keep the emotional character. A GPZ1100 revival could follow exactly that philosophy. Modern suspension, modern brakes, ride-by-wire, multiple riding modes, traction control, ABS, a modern TFT display. But visually, keep it unmistakably GPZ. That contrast could be extremely powerful. But there's one problem. Would Kawasaki actually build it? Realistically, there is no reason to assume Kawasaki has officially announced a 2027 GPZ1100 revival. And that's important. This video is a look at what such a motor... And maybe that's what makes the GPZ1100 so interesting. It wasn't the motorcycle that became the Ninja. It was something that existed before the Ninja changed everything. A big Japanese performance machine from an era when motorcycles didn't need complicated explanations. You saw the engine, you heard the exhaust, you opened the throttle, and you understood. Now imagine that philosophy with 2027 technology. A modern four-cylinder engine, classic GPZ proportions, serious torque, modern electronics, and just enough retro attitude to remind everyone where it came from. Would Kawasaki have a winner? Or would the GPZ1100 be better left as a forgotten legend? Let me know what you think. And if Kawasaki really brought this name back, would you choose the GPZ1100 over a modern Ninja?